And you're all set.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen, April 12th, 2022, 6:30 meeting. All selectmen are present. I call the meeting to order at 6:30. First item of business is public comment. If there is anyone in the waiting room that would like to speak, please just raise your hand. You are certainly welcome. Okay, I see none. Thank you very much. First item of business is scheduled appointments. Town Council Attorney Elizabeth Leiden, administrative consent order for farm dump at Breakneck Hill. Welcome. It's a pleasure to unofficially meet you, I guess, through Zoom anyway. If you wouldn't mind just kind of talking a little bit about the process, how we got here, answering some questions for the board, that would be great.
Sure. So the town took over property in which there was an old farm dump. And there's some background to it that we don't need to get into, but basically DEP has sent us a consent order, and we went through that order with them and met with them and made some changes based on the fact that the adjacent property had some spillover from the old farm dump, and so that will need to be cleaned up as well. And so we'll have to get approval from that abutter to enter onto the property to clean up that area. And so the draft that you see tonight before you is the result of some back and forth between us and DEP to try and work out the deadlines and soften the language a little bit.
Okay, great. We'll go round table here. We'll see if anyone has any questions for you. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. My question is around what potential financial liability does this create for the town? And given the timelines that are in here, what are the short-term and long-term commitments with this?
So the financial liability is there with or without the administrative consent order, because as the property owner, we are liable for the cleanup of the property. And so the timelines that we've put in there have actually been negotiated back and forth based on what we think is within our ability to meet, and considering appropriations and things of that nature. I've gotten assurances from DEP that if we need flexibility in those timelines, we can go back and amend the agreement. So I made sure to get that in writing via separate email from DEP, so that if we need to go back and adjust those timelines, we can, so that we're not subject to the penalties that are listed based on things that are not in our control.
So I think this is a question for Mr. Purple. The appropriation that we have for town meeting for Breakneck Hill, is that all we would anticipate? Is that the full amount for FY23 that we would need to do by committing to this tonight?
Yes.
Okay. And my second question is, I think historically the Board of Health has been involved, especially when Mr. Bazinski was the health director. This is not, to my knowledge, been circulated to the Board of Health for review. And so my request would be that the Board of Health have an opportunity to at least discuss this in an open meeting prior to this getting signed by the Selectmen. And the next Board of Health meeting is scheduled for April 25th. So is that sufficient time to get this executed?
So I think that this works out fairly well. In the conversation that I was involved in with Attorney Leiden with DEP, they want to get that taken care of this month. But I didn't think the board was going to sign this at the first meeting, even though there's really not a whole lot of changes that could be made to the document at this time. But did tell DEP the likelihood is the board would see it on the 12th and likely execute it on the 26th. So if you have your meeting on the 25th, I think that timeline still works as to what we had told DEP.
Great. Thank you. That's all for me.
All right. Mr. Haley.
Yeah. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. So, how does this is an area of the law that is a little bit foreign to me. So how does this document end up being created? In other words, is there a template that's used by DEP and then you work off of that? Is that how this happens?
Yes, and so what they've indicated to me is that the template is very hard to stray from because the purpose of it is that anyone who doesn't have an attorney, this would normally be mandated by DEP, but we have voluntarily entered into this agreement. And so we were trying to get some flexibility in terms of penalties and things like that because of the voluntary nature of this. But they indicated that because this is a template and it's intended for use by everyone and people who do not have the benefit of an attorney advocating for them, it's very hard to stray from the language that's in there. And that's why I had to get an outside writing indicating that we can adjust the timelines and that they will assist with getting the property owner's consent on the adjacent property and things like that. So we did adjust the language a little bit and we were able to get some flexibility in the timelines, but as far as the boilerplate language, there really isn't a lot of flexibility there.
Well, that I've experienced with agencies being sort of stringent and not changing things, so I understand that. Do we have? I haven't seen it. Do we have a copy of the? And I'm not. I have no reason to doubt what you're saying, but is it part of our town materials? The email that you've referenced from DEP.
So that was. Mark has a copy of it.
Okay.
I sent it to him and included him on the back and forth between myself and the attorneys from DEP.
Okay, and so that's signed off on by counsel for DEP.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm comfortable then. Thanks very much. And again, nice to meet you.
You're welcome. You too.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Good to meet you, Elizabeth.
You too.
Hopefully we will have a productive relationship here. A couple of questions. One maybe for Mark. Do we have any estimate, Mark, even ballpark for how this might develop from a cost standpoint? You say we've got FY23 covered. I know it's hard to predict without knowing, what's in there, but is there any way to estimate what the future expense might be? Is it like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, or just no way to tell?
Yes to all. I think I don't want to, I don't want to throw out a number.
Sure.
I think that a lot of the work that's going to be done in fiscal 23 is going to provide a little bit of a roadmap as to what the expenses are going to be. But again, if we're talking about excavating a lot of materials, we're talking about a lot of disturbance, we're talking about, ensuring that the neighbor is protected and their water source is protected. It's going to be a significant cost.
Okay. And to follow up an earlier comment from Attorney Lydon, so this is a result of our approaching DEP as opposed to them coming to us and saying, hey, we understand you have a problem and let's work on it.
Yes. So it is a requirement of the law that if you discover something like this, you are supposed to disclose it. And so not doing so would have been a problem. But we voluntarily entered into the agreement because the alternative is if it was discovered later and we knew about it and we didn't disclose it, it would be a bigger problem.
Okay. I'm also curious where the abutter came in. Is that something that the abutter approached us to say, I think I have an issue here that I need to be part of this process, or did DEP engage the abutter, or did we engage the abutter?
Mark, do you?
Yeah, no, I saw you pause, so I'll take it. The potential footprint for the excavation of the farm dump, there is a likelihood that some of that is going to cross onto the property of the abutter. And so we're working with the abutter for an access agreement to allow us onto the property for the purpose of cleaning this up. And so I think that, that was something that was recognized early on. And that's something that that Ms. Danza, the conservation administrator, has been working with the abutter on.
So we were proactive in that one in terms of
Yes.
the abutter, which is good, I think. Do we have any indication? I would assume the abutter is eager to cooperate with us on that. Is that like the case apparently, or is there going to be an issue?
It's an ongoing discussion.
Okay. Okay, that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dennington.
Hi, first I got a follow-up question for Mark, and I have a question for Elizabeth. So for Mark, this is one of those matters where, and I feel like we've discussed it at probably 3 meetings so far this year, but they've been separated out at such intervals, it's hard for me to keep track of it all. Can you just remind me again, the FY23 funding for the implementation of this, where in the budget do we find it?
It's in the capital article.
Okay, all right. And I had a question about the signed access agreement, which was answered by Sam's question. In paragraph 16, I had a question about that language, Elizabeth, if you have a second. So
Yeah.
It says, nothing in this consent order shall be construed as barring, diminishing, or adjudicating in any way any legal right of DEP to issue any additional order with respect to the subject matter covered by this consent order. And, usually I know this is a consent order is different than a settlement agreement, but usually I think of one of the purposes of the agreement is so that the person or entity that would have a claim against us couldn't come back against us with a claim for the exact same type of matter. So, and I know that some of this is kind of boilerplate type language, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that language. Do you think it's worth trying to, I don't know, tighten it up in a way that it's more favorable to us, or do you have any concerns about it?
I believe that is one of the areas that I tried to get leeway on, and that is some of the boilerplate language. There are laws outside of this that prevent, if this has been resolved here, there would be no reason for them to file another claim. But I think it's all encompassing for any other issue that may arise that's not covered in the agreement, but related to the same topic.
Okay. So, because we're going to clean up the site and that's going to resolve the problem.
Right.
So there really shouldn't be any other claims. Okay. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Andrew, just to follow up, Mark, on Andrew's question regarding this being on the capital plan, this was one, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was one of the items that in order to lower the tax rate, we paid out of ARPA, correct?
Yes, no, that is correct.
Okay.
Trying to keep
Yeah.
that all straight. Yes. So
No,
that
no, no,
is
just
out of
for
ARPA.
clarity, I didn't want someone to go and look.
Okay. So then it's not in a capital. Right?
It's not in the it's not a town
Correct.
meeting. It was simply, so the money is now available and we can begin doing that remediation work now rather than July 1st.
And Andrew, it was originally in the capital plan. So we just pulled it out to offset the budget. So just for clarity on that. Thank you. Mark, question for you. So I assume conservation has discussed this obviously, but conservation, have they taken a position on this?
I don't know if they've taken a position because it is the select board that needs to execute. But I
Great.
will, in doing what has been suggested tonight by Ms. Malinowski and circulating the Board of Health, also make sure that Melissa circulates to her commission and make sure they have an opportunity to provide any feedback
Okay.
or comment to that. Unfortunately, as Attorney Lydon has stated, there's not a lot of wiggle room for a lot of comments because there are areas that you would look at and think that it would be more beneficial if the language was changed here. And I thought it was kind of interesting to be involved in a conversation that, yes, we agree that makes sense, but it's boilerplate. It can't change. What's your other issue? So we had a lot of that discussion.
No, and I get that, but I just think it's important that they at least see it. I mean, I know there's not a whole lot we can comment on it, but at least they can be aware of it. So
I
that
agree.
would be great. And I think Sam asked my other question. So I think I'm all set. If we have Concom, again, look at it. Chelsea, if you bring it to Board of Health on the 25th, then the board can execute on the 26th. Attorney Lydon, thank you. We very much appreciate you coming. It was a pleasure to unofficially meet you, I guess, hopefully soon. That will change and we'll be able to actually see people in person again. So thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you for all the hard work you've done on this. On behalf of the town, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you. Next up, reports. We had nothing really scheduled, but something exciting happened today. So Ms. Malinowski is going to give us a members report.
Okay, so we did a trial run of the OWL technology in the townhouse for the Board of Health meeting this morning. So we probably had 8 people throughout the room. Obviously, the front table was with the board and the staff, and then a few people sprinkled throughout the room. I shared the screen, shared my screen on my laptop, so people in the room could see it on the screen behind the board, as well as the people on Zoom could see remotely. So it allowed us to have hybrid participation, people in the room, people on Zoom. And I thought it worked great. You still need a Zoom facilitator essentially to kind of run, bringing people over if they want to talk via through, remotely. But you don't have to do anything for anyone in the room. It worked great to transition. Even we had a public participation in the back of the room, and it picked him up. So I thought it was so much more seamless than what we did in our last summer. So I was very impressed with it. We only had to use one OWL. We didn't need to have 2 set up. It streamed to YouTube. It recorded. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's a great asset for the town to have, and for the residents to be able to be in person, be at home, listen to, chime in on the one topic that they want to. So I was really happy with it. I think we just need to make sure that any soft-spoken people, which would not be me, speak up, just to make sure that it picks up their video and everything that they're saying accurately. But I thought it was phenomenal, and I was so excited to get to test it out this morning.
Yeah, it was great. I actually was one of the hybrid people that I wanted to see how it works. So I actually raised my hand during public comment, and literally I would have thought that I was in a Zoom meeting from online. It looked no different. The clarity was great. I love the split screen effect as multiple people are talking. I would encourage the board to look at it. My goal is for us to meet on the 26th in person hybrid. So I think that's something exciting. Mr. Healy's been advocating for that for a long time. So I think it's fitting that we certainly do it while he's still on the board. Yeah, so again, I highly recommend everybody look at it. The only caution I would think is that we were going to have to really make sure that if there's somebody downstairs, like on a Tuesday night where we're having a meeting, that no copying or any of that stuff happens, because it's really sensitive to picking up noise. But thank you to the Board of Health and Chelsea for being the guinea pigs on this. I think it, again, hugely successful, very much appreciated. So go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I'm on my other screen here. I'm pulling up the Southborough remote meetings, and I don't see it. Am I looking in the wrong place? Is it not saved where it normally is?
It's there. I looked at it earlier, Marty. Hold on one second.
I couldn't find it either, Marty. I was looking for it earlier myself, and I couldn't find it in several places. So sometimes the YouTube Direct has more stuff than the town YouTube link.
Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to just go back in. I went into YouTube directly.
Mhm.
Southborough remote meetings, Board of Health. It comes up 7 hours ago. There's been 12 views. So
Really?
initially there was 8. So yeah, it comes up BOH meeting, Marty. For me, it's a top 1 hour, 24 minutes.
Huh.
Yep. So I went in through youtube.com. So.
Okay, I went in through the town website. Maybe that's the.
Okay.
I mean, I'll find. I just wanted to see if I could see it in real time and how it was
Really?
operating. So
It's,
okay,
it's really awesome. It's really awesome.
all right.
So,
It will test my technical skills. I'll find it one way or the other.
awesome. That's great. Thank you.
But thanks, Chelsea.
Sam or Andrew, did you just want to chime in anything for Chelsea on this?
Oh, sounds great.
No, that sounds great.
Yep.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much. That takes us through reports. Mark, you didn't have anything not listed to add?
No, I just wanted to piggyback on what was said. I just want to thank our IT manager, Jay Montijo, for helping to shepherd this and to test it out and try and get us to the point where we could at least do this beta test, which I think, went really well. I did watch it on YouTube, and it's a very intuitive little thing. And hopefully we can, get everything worked out and then look to come to the board with a consideration for ARPA to purchase some more so we can outfit, the other rooms and everything. So we'll continue to be, taping as many of the meetings as we can and continue to expand that library.
Yeah, I think it's great. The public feedback, again, we've talked about this before, has been pretty incredible. So again, Chelsea, thank you for being the guinea pig and being so successful at it for the Board of Health. So thank you. All right, next up, consent agenda. We are going to pull item C. We're not ready for that, so C is off the table. Do we have any holds on A? Andrew, Sam, potentially too?
Minutes, let me see, is that,
March 24th?
yeah, March 24th, I have one edit on that.
Okay, we'll come right back to that. Is there any holds on B? I see none. Do we have a motion to accept the resignation of Brendan Campbell from Police Department effective April 18th, 2022?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
And Ms. Brascio. Aye. Thank you. Andrew, you went first. You said on the minutes for March 24th.
Yes, on line 144. I think it should say meet instead of meeting. That's it.
Okay. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. On line 317, 317, it should be MVNO instead of D, Mobile Virtual Network Operator, MVNO.
I just
That's
had
it?
no idea what that meant, so that's why I didn't.
Any others? Ms. Malinowski, Mr. Healy? Bridget, I see that you're here again, once again, on a huge meeting. Once again, thank you very much for being as precise and pretty incredible, the 2 minor edits. So thank you. That being said, sorry, Sam, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. Awesome. So we have a motion to approve open session meeting minutes, March 24th, 2022 as amended.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
And Ms. Brascio. Aye. Thank you. That takes us to other matters. Item A, board statement on Park Central decision. The select board voted tonight in executive session to not participate in any appeal of the Park Central project. We respect the process and the decision rendered. Town council has notified the defendant, Park Central LLC, of our position. That's all we have for that. Fiscal year 2023 budget. Where we ended up with advisory is we have one difference, and that's the $50,000 we talked about on the Board of Health. Otherwise, we're in agreement. So that's basically an update as to where we're at. Other than that, for the budget piece, I think we're good. Mark, were there any additional changes? Usually Brian gives us a little update if anything's changed. I don't believe.
No, I'll just be persnickety. It's a $54,000 difference with
Thank you.
with advisory.
Thank you.
But that is the only variance. I think there may be some funding changes in the capital budget, but that is still to be determined. But no, but I think and kudos to everybody in the process, this board, other boards, the finance team, and that to come down to a 2.3 increase before you take the adjustment, the 12% shift for the residential valuation increase, I think is it's a great job. I've seen a lot of other communities are struggling with a lot higher numbers, and so I think it's good.
Okay, so Mark, where did we end up? Sorry, Chelsea, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask some questions related to FY23 budget, but if you're not done, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
So just in terms of what we're planning on presenting at town meeting, we know we're at 2.73 without a shift, but I think we need to communicate with what our prediction is, or our best estimate at this point, or guesstimate, based on the residential shift from commercial. How are we planning to make sure that the public understands that even though, the percentages in the warrant lead to 2.73, that's probably not what it's going to mean on their tax bills? Do we have a plan?
2.3, not 2.73.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. Do we know how we're planning to communicate that? Is that going to be in whoever presents the budget article?
Well,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, as part of any meeting materials that go up on the town website, is there a memo, summary budget memo that could be a little bit more elaborate than the summary part of the article that we could include at least there? Or what are your thoughts?
Good question.
So I would be happy to work with, with Mr. Ballantyne to put together a draft for the board to consider. I don't know if this is something that you want to come from the board in terms of the budget. I know that advisory is probably going to put together their own memo. So I didn't know whether the board would want to put together a memo giving your view of the budget and how it was constructed and the impacts. So I'm happy to do either.
So we're not meeting again technically. I mean, we're meeting tomorrow night with advisory, but we're not meeting again till the 26th. Chelsea, would you be willing to work with the finance team just to put together something? I mean, I'm comfortable. You're our liaison. I would be completely comfortable with that. Something that we could get out sooner rather than later.
Sure.
And again, I only have a few more weeks to delegate. So if you would be happy to do that, I'm comfortable. I don't know if the board is comfortable with that as well.
And just to make it easy, if you just simply want to provide a skeleton of where you want to go, then we'll take it in that direction.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chelsea.
Sorry, I have one other
Go ahead.
comment on
Go
that.
ahead.
So now that the budgets are finalized, can we put all of the detail budgets up on the town website so that if people want to look at the detail more than just kind of the snippet of salaries and expenses that's in the warrant, can we just post them so they're available?
So Mr. Ballantyne was working on that with Miss Berry this afternoon. The question was where we're going to put them, and I think we're going to put them under the town meeting information.
Yep,
that's good.
So there'll be, that's where the final warrant will be. That's where all of that. So I think that's probably the best place to put it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Purple
Lisa?
regarding go ahead, Sam.
A question about the communication. Should we include in that process that goes out to the public some sort of a brief statement of quotes highlights of things that people might be interested in understanding in terms of, for example, a quick summary of how we got to the 2.3% and a little conversation about the ARPA impact on this, et cetera, sort of a primer of, here's the context for what you're going to see in terms of all the numbers, because I think most people don't have the time or effort to dig through everything to sort of know what's going on. So what are the Cliff Notes version of what's interesting here to look at, maybe topics that we've discussed at length between us, the finance team, advisory, et cetera. And clearly Board of Health is a conversation that's been going on here. So a notable 3 bullet point summary. Here's what we did. Here's what the plan is going forward with that, et cetera. I would think that would be a useful sort of guide for people to better understand what some of the key points are in this. But, again, there are some people who dig through it all, but most people I don't think have the patience or background to figure out what's important here. And it will be different for various people, but given what we've done historically, might be worth hitting a few of the high points, I think.
I think that's the purpose of the letter. I think is really to kind of give the the
Okay.
public some level of direction as to a little bit of an executive summary. If you're not going to go through the whole budget, that's kind of why we do the summaries at the end of the warrant articles. If you don't read anything else, read the summaries. It
Yep.
gives you a good idea of what's going on. And I think that's the intention, at least it'd be my intention of the letter,
Okay.
to try to
Good.
give people a broad brush without having to go through this entire process we've been working on for 6 months.
Okay, good.
I think there's some points that were brought up from the auditor last week that would be relevant for
Yeah.
this letter. Like, we have a AAA bond rating for X, just at a high level, so people
Yeah.
kind of get a sense of where we're at financially as a town. And why we make the decisions that we make to use ARPA, because maybe not everybody's been following that too.
And I'd throw in the OPEB and pension liability there because people get concerned about the big numbers there. And I guess my bottom line is I'm not too worried about OPEB. I think that'll sort itself out more or less naturally here. But the pension thing that Tony Rosselli mentioned the other night, I think is a concern, to say there's an issue lurking out 5 to 10 years in the future for us, given the history on the Worcester County pension operation that we need to keep an eye on. So having that on the radar screen for people might be a useful heads
But
up.
that's one of the things, especially with OPEB, you got to be careful because you can't just throw that out. Well, we have a liability of $50 million. In other news, and people like, wait a minute, what are we talking about? What is this? And,
Yeah.
I know the board was truly engaged with the auditor and the actuary when they were here, but town meeting isn't going to have the time to try to get their hands around some of that.
Yeah.
And Sam, I think that might be something we could create separately and put up on the Selectmen's website as well and link people to.
I think it's much better off for us to be proactive there than to somebody to read stuff and come up with a huge number there is just a disaster kind of thing. So,
Yeah. One other thing, Chelsea, if you could make sure, I know you would ask the question regarding local receipts and where, the conservativeness and whatnot, if you could address that in there in the auditor's response, that would be appreciated too. Okay. All right. That takes us through. So item C, the town meeting warrant. We have 4 items that we still can take positions on that we haven't voted on. One is the salary administration plan. I know we got some new information this afternoon. I'm not sure if the board's comfortable in taking a position. I'd really like some time to delve into that. So I'm comfortable with leaving that at town meeting if the board is comfortable with that.
I agree.
that's okay. I'm okay with the personnel board recommendations, but I'm okay with waiting too.
Okay. So we will leave that as at town meeting. Mark, do we need to take a motion on that to leave it at town meeting? I don't believe we did on the others.
I don't think you do. I
don't think so.
am showing the votes, but I'm assuming if no one is opposed, it's going to be a 5-0, or unless anyone abstains or recuses. So
Fine, it's easy enough to make a motion. Do we have a motion to take a position on the salary administration plan at town meeting?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. It's just quicker to do it that way, Mark. That leads us down to the noise bylaw. So I had heard from, I don't know if anyone from the noise bylaw committee is out there before I speak.
Mr. Mello.
Mr. Mello, if we could bring him over. I did hear from their chair briefly today that that he wasn't able to make it tonight, but that the committee is aware of the controversy on section 9, and they discussed taking no action on the matter at this time. So, Chelsea, I know it was on the Board of Health agenda today. Do you just want to update us on that quickly?
Sure. Yes. So, and as you know, Dr. Alker is an ex officio on the noise bylaw committee. So she was at the noise bylaw committee last Thursday, and I think it was discussed that the Board of Health would be discussing, as the Board of Health are the ones who essentially came up with the direction for the noise bylaw. So bottom line is the Board of Health took a unanimous position today to take section 9 out of the article. And the rationale behind that was to not go against town council's advice, as well as the board's willingness and eagerness, I think, to have put some short-term and long-term solutions in place for people dealing with any sort of noise that would fall under the Board of Health's jurisdiction outside of what's addressed in this specific Southborough noise bylaw. And that we are going to put the language that was in Section 9 on the Board of Health's website so that people have somewhere to go to understand where to look at from the state and what is within the Board of Health's purview, as well as developing a complaint form for noise so that we have paper trails going forward and we can track anything that comes forward from residents or anyone else in the community. And then the long-term solution is for the Board of Health to adopt a rules and regs specific to noise. And that hopefully will start summer into fall, and as long as it takes, and go through the proper hearings with Board of Health. So Board of Health was comfortable with it. It's not taking any authority away. They understood the concern around what town council raised.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. Mr. Mello, I'm gonna come to you next. Like I said, I had read a note to the board that your chair had sent. I don't know if you want to add anything further before I open it up to the board. Certainly, we appreciate everything that the Noise Bylaw Committee has done. And
no, I think as well summarized. I wish we could create a one-page bylaw, but it's fine. Peter sent his notes, so thank you.
all right, great. Thank you. And again, thank you for all the hard work and the long hours you guys have put in a very short time frame. It is greatly appreciated.
Well, look at you guys. I'm like, I can't believe you guys do this.
Well, thank you very much. Just so the board knows, Mr. Purple has created 2 separate warrants, and Andrew, I'll go round table. Just so the board is aware, if the board chooses, it is the Board of Selectmen's article, the board can take out the provision before it goes to print tomorrow. And Mr. Purple has 2 versions of the warrant, one with it in, one with it out. Mark, do you want to add anything to that before I go around to the board?
No, I think that's accurate. You know, I know that the sentiment I think the board expressed about Section 9 at the last meeting was trying to get ahead of the game, and I know that this is being taken up by the bylaw committee. So we created 2 versions. So whatever you do tonight, it does not affect our process in the morning.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to get you. I'm just going to go in the order that I always do to keep it fair. So Marty?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I think what Chelsea and the Board of Health have described makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like the noise bylaw folks will be comfortable with that approach as well. So all good here.
Okay, Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. As I stated last time we discussed this, I'm fine with Section 9 being in. On the other hand, I think it's useful and important to have Board of Health support for this. So I'm also fine with removing it. So let's keep moving.
All right, thank you, Sam. Mr. Dennington.
Yeah, and my position on Section 9 is basically the same as Mr. Stivers. So I think that means there's now select board consensus to take it out, right? Because the Board of Health is kind of stepping up to the plate to address it directly. I just, in reviewing it at the last, I noticed a couple like typo little things in Section 4, and I don't know if it's too late to.
Nope.
Okay, so this is listing prohibited activities. So it's saying these are activities that are prohibited if they generate an unreasonable disturbance. And then number 3, John, I don't know if you have a copy of it with you.
I'll get one. There's also Tim Fling is on you can bring him in. I think he's on.
Absolutely, thank you.
It says, so this is a list of things that are prohibited. Motor vehicles operating within the town of Southborough must adhere, and it should say adhere to MGL Chapter 90, Section 16, which addresses harsh, objectionable, or unreasonable noises. So for just grammatically, it doesn't make sense because you're listing things that are prohibited, and this is saying something that this is like another prohibition in a list of. If you look at it, you'll see it just grammatically doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So Andrew, what was your suggestion? Just to add the word to? Or,
How about this? How about this? Just taking a stab at it. So, you could say, motor vehicles operating within the town of Southborough, in violation of MGL Chapter 90, Section 16, comma, which addresses harsh, objectionable, or unreasonable noises.
Mr. Mello?
Well, that's the intent of that section. So,
Right. Okay. Mr. Slang, I just want to make sure you both have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening. I just jumped from the other historical call, so sorry for my delay. I believe that that's the right call, John. I agree. I think it's
Okay.
the right context. We just maybe wrong wording.
Okay, Mark, did you get that?
I did, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Andrew, continue.
That's it. Also, I mean, list number 5 in section 4. I think there shouldn't be a comma after designated as. That's the only other grammatical thing I caught.
Should not be a comma?
Should not be a comma.
Okay.
Okay. So, Mark, I'm assuming process-wise, we should take a vote on the article as amended, taking out section 9 with Andrew's 2 changes. And then we can take can we do it all in one motion to support the article? What is the best process for you?
It's
You know
easy
me.
for me to make the change because I know what you want to do, but
Done.
I think
Okay.
process wise, you can roll it all into,
Fine.
if Mr. Healy is okay with it, you can roll it all into one.
I'm chuckling because Andrew doesn't like commas. I do. I would have added an additional comma in there after a budding, but taking it out is also good.
I actually would have as well.
I thought so too. That's why I was questioning taking it out in the first place, but okay.
Some people are addicted to commas, some people aren't. So, so do you want me to try to make them? So I will move then that the Board of Selectmen support Article 26 as amended to the following extent. Number 1, to remove section 9. And number 2, to make the Scrivener's changes that Mr. Dennington suggested.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much again. Please share our thanks for all of the hard work. Tim and John and I called you John this time, by the way. I remembered from last time, but all the hard work you guys have done, it's so appreciated by everybody. And we look forward to bringing this to town meeting.
Yeah, very good
Thank you.
work, folks, really.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So that leaves Article 27 and 28, which we're meeting on tomorrow. So I think at this point, we should probably make a motion at town meeting on this.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Okay, that takes care of the positions. Approval of final warrant for signatures. Mark, I just have one question for you before we approve the final warrant. I know I talked to you earlier today. Did the changes to the at town meeting positions for advisory get changed within
Yes.
the warrant?
Yeah,
Okay,
there was a miscommunication, probably on my part, as to making sure that everything matched up. So what you have on the so-called cheat sheet that I issue is correct.
Okay.
But if you look in the warrant, you may notice that there are some positions for advisory that don't match this. They have since been corrected. As we sit here right now, it's all set.
Perfect. And just one other question for me, and then we'll go round table if anyone has anything else. At the very beginning, have the page numbers been inserted in the last copy that I got? At the very
Yes.
beginning in the contents, so those are now inserted within the final draft that we're,
Yes, they are. Table of contents is page 2 and everything rolls from there.
okay, perfect. Any other questions regarding the board on the warrant? Go ahead, Sam.
And I had 3 typos that I passed along today to Melanie and Mark. Are those in there, Mark, now?
Yeah, I do want to note that 2 of those were in the moderator's instructions and have been there forever. But I appreciate
forever.
those are kind of historical, but now that you want to change them, so no, that's fine. Those have all been taken care of.
Good.
I think the only other thing regarding the warrant now is I think you're all set to finally to vote and to close it out. And I appreciate the effort. I don't think I've had a warrant process like this in a long time that has been this much of a nurturing. But the one thing the board will have to consider will be who is making motions on the various articles. Now, I know that I used to do a lot of work on putting motions together for these and that, and people have kind of said, well, why aren't we simply saying, moved as printed in the warrant? Because a lot of them are. And most of those will be, but there will be some, such as the budget article and the wrap up motion. Newton Street has a special vote because of the funding sources. So bond council has prepared. So there will be a couple of those. So I'm not sure how you want to do that in terms of assigning, who's making motions.
Well, Mark, I still think though, even though we say the motion as printed in the warrant, there's still a summary. So we'll have to assign board members to specific articles to, do the summary for it. So we can certainly do that. We can work on putting something together for our meeting on the 26th. We can assign, and then if somebody has something specific, they'd like to make the motion on, obviously the board's always amenable to that as well. But typically in the past, we've just done it and gone over it with the board.
Don't you normally let the outgoing member do all the motions? Isn't that how that
I
works?
have a couple on the list for Marty already. So yeah, I mean, Marty will get his fair share. Don't worry.
I have a feeling I know some of the ones I'm getting, and that's fine with me.
Yep. I think we're on the same page.
Hey, Mark.
Okay, so go ahead.
Mark,
Yes, sir.
Is it true that your contract has been rewritten to get a bonus for the number of versions of the warrant that are produced?
You want to prepare that amendment, Mr. Stivers? I'm
I'm
sure
counting
it's
like
something
20
we
or
could-
something at this point.
We could have that conversation. It's just, it gets to the point that we have to start deleting old versions because there are so many iterations of it running around. In fact, when I was on vacation, Mrs. Hale, when I looked in the folder, there were versions and they had times next to them, same day,
Yeah.
various times. So yeah, it's tough to keep it all in line. So
Shouldn't
I
have gone on
appreciate
vacation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know what? I'm never really on vacation. I think most of you end up knowing that somehow.
Yeah.
So
Well, obviously, Mark, thank you to the finance team for, all of the hard work that went into this budget season, for our liaison, Chelsea, as well. You guys put in a lot of time and effort to get us where we're at. And just know it's appreciated. This was an odd year. I agree. There was probably more revisions than I've ever seen in my tenure on the board.
kudos to Melanie. Melanie, this is the last leg of what I've called the gauntlet for her in her first 6 months. She's had the licensing process. She's had the town report, which should be back in the next couple of days. It looks great. The proof that I saw and the warrant. And so now she can begin to settle in maybe to some of the other things and continue with some of the procurement training. So it's really been great. She's been very helpful with this.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Next, item D, update on select board EDC business visit with Ferris Development. So Andrew and I had an opportunity to participate in the coordinated effort that we've been talking about in the past of going out with EDC, meeting our business owners, and, just starting a conversation, sharing a vision. And we had the opportunity to meet with the Ferris Development Group. They have been very proactive in purchasing buildings on Route 9. They purchased 118 and 120, as well as they just recently purchased the CAS building. So it was a great conversation. You know, their plan is to turn it into a self-storage. They thought it was a great placement on Route 9 to be able to do that. They talked about potentially looking at some affordable units, potentially at the back, which is also always a win for the town of Southborough. One of the things we really talked about was relationships are important. They talked a lot about that one of the reasons they've been very successful in bringing businesses to Southborough is because of the split tax rate. And they felt it would be a challenge based on Southborough doesn't have a lot of the amenities. We've talked about this a million times before, so I won't delve too deep into it. But they thought that that was a plus in then bringing businesses to Southborough. We talked a little bit about, you know, right now lab and industrial are hot numbers, but it's tough for us to bring any labs onto Route 9 because we don't have sewer. So obviously the sewer discussion was a good part of the meeting. He did have some great things to say about our building department, that the process has worked really well. Lori and the inspectors have been very responsive. One of the things they appreciated was having the ability to get temporary occupancy permits. That, you know, that's huge. A lot of towns don't offer that. So they found that great. They thought lack of natural gas was also potentially something that prohibited businesses. Multi-use was very important, and they referenced specifically the building on White's Corner where Tomaso's and Ola is. You know, that's a great generator for bringing businesses to town. Let's see, they talked about flexibility along Route 9 is great, and that the industrial use gives them a little bit of that. One of the other things we talked about was with some of these zoning pieces, it might be fruitful to add a planning board member, you know, to go on these visits, you know, so planning board can hear, they can take back for the discussions as well. Great meeting overall. I think I got a lot out of it. We asked a lot of business questions, you know, specifically to how the market's changed. I know prior to COVID or post-COVID, I guess, we've talked a lot about how vacancies and, you know, businesses, whether they're looking to downsize now that people are working hybrid, and he's not really seeing that. Their vacancy rate is good. They're renovating the building out in the back, which is great. Andrew, what am I missing?
Sure, just a couple things I wrote down. One,
Yep.
Ferris Development moved their headquarters from the Solomon Donald Lynch Boulevard in Marlborough to Southborough, so that's great. They now have 4 commercial properties south of Route 9 going the whole length from the 495 interchange to the building that we were at by the reservoir. The CAS building, that is a 10-acre parcel. I think, Elisa, that's about roughly accurate.
Yep.
So the more interesting plan, first off, it's great that the interior of the vacant CAS building is being basically gutted inside and then redeveloped. But then the more interesting part of it is what they might do with the portion of the parcel that's behind, and I think they might be trying to get a ANR to split that. And another thing that I found very good about the format, so it's 1 hour. We had the 2 representatives from the EDC and Marika, 2 representatives from the select board and their whole team. So these are really useful meetings where it's just one set time. It's really just about making introductions and identifying things that we share in common. I definitely agree that with Lisa, in terms of follow-up next steps, I think it's helpful if, you know, other select board members also get an opportunity to participate in some of these meetings. I know Chris Robbins is very enthusiastic about follow-up, maybe making something regular. I know Marika did a good job setting this up. So I just encourage other select board members to consider participating. And then also, I do think that ZBA, planning board, these are other boards that I think could might be interested in participating.
Yeah, I agree, Andrew. I think it for specifically Ferris, I think it would have great value in having that. One of the other things that you reminded me when you said that is we talked about the CAS building and the assessed value is $3 million roughly right now. By the time they're done, it's going to be assessed at 10 million. So there's, additional tax revenues that will be coming to the town as well. So I thought that was one of the big points as well. But overall, a great meeting. Marika did a great job in setting it up. And, as we move forward and opportunities come, other board members will certainly be able to participate. I did it years ago. Brian Schifrin and I were the first ones that started it with Chris. And it's a tremendous value. It's a value to the community, to the businesses, to know that, the town wants to work with you and we value you being here. So again, great meeting. Very much appreciated Andrew participating in that as well. And there'll be more forthcoming for other members of the board as well. So that was just an update. That takes us to E. So discussion of flag school lease with the Historical Society. So just a quick little bit of background. So for, excuse me, 20 years, there was a lease in place with the society. It, as we found with some of the current events that have happened, the lease is currently not in place. It expired in 2017. Back in 2011, when the second lease was signed, then chair, Mr. Falcone, had talked about at one of their annual meetings that they signed the second 10-year lease with the town in 2007. We've been responsible for the total operating cost of the museum. That includes heat, electricity, water, phone, alarm monitoring, insurance, snow removal, general repairs, and maintenance. So those were some of the things that the lease had a nominal fee. I believe it was $10 a year. So what I'm asking the board to do is there's currently nothing in place with the society at this point. And per the lease that expired in 2017, at the expiration or termination, that'll remove all personal property and return the premises. I don't think anyone is looking for that to happen. So I think we need to be proactive, work with the society, work with town council, and get a lease, again, put back in place that, meets all the requirements of what we as a town can do for a nonprofit. And I think that's why the steps were in place to include, the utilities as you would with a normal lease. So I'm looking for a member of the board to work with the Historical Society. I would be happy to do it. I know back in 2016, Mr. Weishan had talked about approaching the town and renegotiating the terms. So I would be happy, unless there's another member of the board that would like to, start these discussions and try to get a lease in place that protects both the town and the society and all the work that they've done there. So go ahead, Sam.
Lisa, question.
Sure.
I would be happy to do it. On the other hand, I'm happy to defer to you to it. But I guess my intent is that we would continue the lease on essentially the same terms as it had been historically. I'm not particularly personally eager to have a huge change in the terms there because I think
Agreed.
And continuity here. So, but
Yep.
I fully support your engaging in that process to get an updated lease.
Yeah, I Sam, I'm not looking to add, anything other than what's required by any lease or the lease of the past as you have them for the last 20 years. I don't think there's any specific big changes needed. So
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, Lisa, from what you're just, boy, pretty much, every lease I think I signed when I was renting places in, any number of different cities and the leases I'm familiar with, that when the term of a lease runs out, that it continues on a month-to-month basis. That's not included in this lease?
No, so I was actually surprised at that, Marty, but it says
I'm really surprised.
it's under section 10D. It says at the expiration or termination of this lease to remove all personal property and return the premises to the condition as it was at the beginning of the term, reasonable use, wear and tear. Yeah, and again, I certainly don't have a stomach to ask anybody to again, I think it's simple enough. Leases were in place for 20 years.
Yeah, and let's have a provision in the next one that continues it on a month-to-month basis when it runs out. So.
Absolutely. Something reasonable. And I think, these leases in the past have been. So we'll work with council. We'll make sure that we have all the updated language and whatnot that we need. So, I'm happy to do it. Sam, if you prefer to do it, again, I don't have an issue with that either. I know the history of the lease.
Happy to have you do it.
Okay, that's fine. Again, not looking for any big changes here, folks.
Can I
Just
make a motion to
get-
have Mr. Stivers do it?
Wait a minute. I'm not going to second that motion.
Awesome. So we'll get that done. And again, we're not looking for any big changes or anything from prior leases. Okay, that leads us to item F. And I just wanted to, Andrew and I had a little bit of a discussion. So Andrew, do you want to just kind of briefly update the board on kind of where the park, the group is? I know, then I'll add, I had a nice conversation with Marguerite Landry today as well. So why don't I start with you, Andrew, and we'll just kind of give, this is basically just an update because we don't have all the information I told Marguerite I would get. So
sure.
ahead, Andrew.
I see Marguerite is in the audience here.
Okay, we'll bring her over.
Acknowledge her. So the reason why I wanted to come to the board at this time is because, as you'll recall, the charge for the St. Mark Street Park Working Group had an aspirational deadline of making a recommendation to the select board by April 15th concerning a recommendation about how to fill the circular space in the plans for the park. In the charge also is in the park that will be built on the triangular parcel. So the good news and the bad news is we do not right now have a recommendation. In fact, I think the group, there are different views among the 6 members of the working group. And as you know, there's been a lot of discussion locally about a whole bunch of different issues related to this park. And there have been some discussions that are very concretely focused on filling the unfilled circle. And remember, the whole reason how we got to this place was because the original plan was to have a playground in the circle, and that was removed in part due to what was going on with the South Union Schoolhouse a year ago. Time flies. So that's kind of the background of that. There's been some discussion about where we could fit in some type of a historical marker, monument, memorial, whatever you want to call it, that would be dedicated to a historical theme. And there's an opportunity there to talk about Native American history. There's really no other area in the town that does that. But I think that there's also, and some of the discussion has been about issues that are a little, I want to say not completely relevant to the charge, but are related, including the Massachusetts Historical Commission's letter from November, and there are different interpretations of how to read that letter, concerning the advisability or not of doing an archaeological dig on the parcel before you do whatever you do next. So Marguerite is here. She is the chair. I am the vice chair. So that's a kind of a status report. I think that because this is a working group, that the end product is to generate a recommendation. I think it might be helpful to get some further just feedback from the board about what I've said so far, and then thoughts about how closely you want the working group to stick to this charge, or do you also want there to be discussion of other kind of these related issues that I was talking about? So Marguerite, does that kind of capture it?
Yes.
In some kind of State Department type language?
That captures it.
And Selectman Stivers has also been in the Zoom audience for a lot of these meetings, and so I think he could offer some observations as well.
Okay, so Andrew, let me just say, I think most of us have watched the meetings, whether we're in the Zoom audience or not. I think we've all, to some level, have seen the hard work that's gone on there, and I commend, obviously. Marguerite and I talked about this earlier today. You guys had a daunting task in front of you, and it's very much appreciated, everything that you've done. And Marguerite, I'll certainly jump back to you. We had a brief discussion today, kind of regarding the charge. The scope of the charge was somewhat narrowed. But obviously the goal, I think, for all of us is to work together and take a look at what's there and how can we enhance and do what's best. And one of the things, and I know I had reached out to Ms. Galligan after I spoke to Marguerite, just to try to get some feedback from her as far as if, and Andrew, you may have had this discussion with her already, as far as, is there any wiggle room at all specifically on the design? And if there is, how far the board is willing to go. I mean, one of the things, actually, Andrew, why don't I let you answer that first, and then I'll kind of continue down the path I'm going.
Okay, well, when Marguerite and I met with Karen on, I believe, March 2nd, we were talking about that we touched on this issue. My understanding, because I would also want to confirm this again with Karen, I've also read the contract, and
Yep.
Is that you could move things around a little bit. You could make some type of little adjustments to the plan, and there might be some expense to that. But the key thing that would trigger additional expense would be altering the ratios of permeable, impermeable surface, which would affect the stormwater calculation. Because one piece of this that's permanent, and I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to go out and look at this site, is, there's that curved part that is the layout of the reoriented St. Mark's Street, right? And then south of that, there are at least 3 drainage pipes, which are now connected into other, I don't know what you would call it, basically, stormwater pipes that are encased in concrete. So those can't move. Any design has to work within that. And one of the whole purposes of this project was to improve drainage. So just summarizing again, I thought that you could change a little bit of things, of angles of different paths or widths of different paths, just as long as you didn't affect the overall stormwater calculations. Is that
Okay.
the impression that you had too, or?
Yes, but I'm just going to follow up with Karen. So one of the things that Marguerite and I talked about today was, being able to do library programming. And, the library has an interest in being able to take advantage of some of the trees that are left there for shade. So one of the things we talked about, and again, I haven't talked to Karen to see if it's even possible but one of the points, I guess, for the board to consider is on the bottom portion of the project, where the trees are now, just north of the stone wall for the cemetery. There's a big area there. I think at the closest, it's probably 25 or 30 feet. And then it stretches up to where the curve of the walkway is. We talked about seeing if there's a way to just be able to potentially just seed that and leave it as grass, leave it as a spot that the library could utilize. We talked a little bit about accessibility, and maybe there's the opportunity there as well to just add a small path that someone with mobility issues could come into the circle, but could come to this programming area as well. We kind of divide it into 2 sections. So that was one of my questions for Karen. It's not as much altering what's there, but allowing kind of good things to happen in that area as well, leaving it some level of undisturbed, and again, utilizing that as a resource area with grass. Marguerite, did I kind of sum that piece up?
Perfect.
Okay, so I think that's a win overall. If we'd be looking at actually adding maybe just a small, ADA compliant little path that would, again, allow access to that area. So I haven't heard back from Karen on that. Obviously, the board can have a bigger discussion when we talk easements and whatnot on the 26th about this, but I just wanted to give the board a brief update, as well as one of the things I had also mentioned, and Andrew, I don't know that I've even mentioned this to you, was one of the things I was thinking potentially, as far as a history walk goes, is depending on if the circle is where we end up, which I think at this point, it's probably going to be by the sounds of it regarding drainage and whatnot. We have a great opportunity here for a couple of different things. We have a great opportunity. A lot of places you go have historical plaque or whatnot. I think we have the opportunity to create our own little history walk here with QR codes that the Historical Commission could define some of the history in Southborough within this area. I hate to use the zoo as an example, but a lot of times when you go to the zoo, there's a little plaque with information, you know, and I just think it'd be, again, we have enough smart minds in this town utilizing that. And then as far as the center goes, you know, obviously still our intent was to be able to pay tribute to the Nipmunks, you know, that were here before us. So one of the other things I think would be useful is I've thought about this for a long time, and I've talked about it with a few people as well. It might be an interesting opportunity for us as well to start a conversation with the Nipmunk tribe and allow this to be an educational tool. I would love for them to be able to come and do like a weekend event and allow them to share their history with our town. So again, I think we can tie a lot of things into this with the discussion. I think it would be great to get their input as well on the center. Marguerite had mentioned that as well to me earlier today, that, you know, to have their input. So we can certainly start those discussions, you know, if that's a path the board is interested in. But I think as far as tonight goes, Andrew, specifically, you're just looking for guidance on what we, you know, as far as the charge goes. Obviously, we would have to amend the charge because April 15th isn't going to happen. So I think that's step one.
It was a little bit of a soft.
It was. Okay. So you don't think there's a reason at this point to make any amendments to that piece?
If I could speak up,
Sure.
Our meetings have been interesting, and I think that we expanded our charge without paying a lot of good attention to it. But there were issues that came up, such as an archaeological dig or you know, what was going where, that kind of expanded. And I don't think we can get it done by the 15th. I think we need more time. I think it would be nice if we had at least a couple of months. There has been reaching out to the Nipmuc tribe there. I contacted the Mass Commission on Indian Affairs. I talked to one of the state archaeologists. I talked to both of the archaeologists who were involved in the dig in Ashland. I've had the Ashland Historical Commission. I've talked to a lot of people, and I think that in a sense we didn't do just the memorial, but we did a lot more that I think needed to be discussed. And part of that was the idea of excavation, which half of our working group supports doing. My feeling when I talked with Lisa this afternoon was that the area for excavation, which would be north of the stone wall, rather than going into a huge complicated process about this, if we can seed that over with grass and not tamper with it and use it simply as a grassy area and just not do anything right now, it leaves us the option to dig later if we want to. I personally am not really in favor of digging. I think even if you dig, you've got to do a park there afterwards. But I think that there's enough feeling in the working group about looking to see if there are remains there that I would respect that, and I would just say if it's grassed over, nothing's going to get in the way of what is under the ground there. That I think would be, in my opinion, a valuable reason to modify the design that's supposed to go in there. And as for the ratio hard and soft, I talked to Bill Sines also. He's on our committee and he's part of the ADA. He said there are other designs that would be equally ADA compliant that could go in there that might work better. The other thing that he said, and he was accurate as I tested it out, is that piece of land has 3 zones. The zone next to 85 is quite noisy. The zone in the middle is medium noisy, too noisy to read stories to children in. And the zone over to the north of the old burial ground is quieter. That when I spoke to Kim Ivers, the children's librarian, she said she would like to do story hours over there. The other parts were too noisy. So I think open space can plant their garden along 85. I think that's fabulous. If there's a grassy sward that would protect anything that's underground for the foreseeable future, then that is good. I understand the drainage situation with Karen, and I think that's something that could be worked on. But I think and Andrew, I hope I'm right on this, but I think we've looked at some really important issues on this tiny piece of land and learned a great deal about what would work there and what we would like it to be. And I think a memorial is a fabulous idea, and I think it would go in the middle zone, but I'm not quite sure what the shape of that would look like. And I would be very happy if Karen Gellan would say if it doesn't cost the town any money, if we can reconfigure slightly what that engineering firm came down with for that design, it might make a lot of people very happy. So I would ask for another couple of months at least of deliberations on the part of the working group. And the other thing I would like to say is I would like Karen to put to pave the new St. Mark's Street right now and get that functioning so that St. Mark's can build its parking area. I don't see any reason to hold that up at all.
All right,
I don't
thank
see any
you.
conflict with doing that street right now. So
All
that's
right.
where I am on that.
All right, Marguerite, thank you. So I do have a call into Karen. I mean, when we talked about the design to some level, it made sense. I mean, obviously, Marty, you can jump in on this as well. I'll come to you first. I mean, it was important for a gathering space for the board to have a space that was mobility accessible. And I think that was very important to all of us, and with connecting the sidewalks and whatnot. I don't know, as I said, Marguerite, I was going to ask Karen the question, but it sounds like Andrew's kind of answered it a little bit as far as design and whether it changes and what the cost would be at this point. So I'm just going to kind of open it up. Marty, your thoughts on?
Well, I mean, everything that's been said is consistent with the idea of what this space was going to be. So, I mean, we're talking about, is there a way to tweak the design that accomplishes, honestly, some, I don't disagree that they are important things, but they're pretty minor things. I mean, the concept for this piece of property from the get-go was, had 3 or 4 different elements to it. Number one, it would be an extension of some work that was already being done at the library by open space, by the folks at the library, to make the outside grounds of the library a more welcoming, utilitarian space for all sorts of programs and the like. And so one of the concepts for this space is that it is contiguous to what already was being done at the library space. And this would extend that. And it would extend it in a way that quite frankly, I still think accomplishes, with more land coming to Southborough from St. Mark's on the easement side of things, a balance that's very much in favor of Southborough. The folks who did the design, VHB, I mean, I worked with them for a long time on the Main Street project. They're good at what they do. I can't imagine that, I mean, they've got a long-standing relationship with the town to the extent that flexibility and, quite frankly, keeping costs tamped down, that can't be communicated as a priority to them. And again, I think the town, Mark, I think your impression is the same, that we've had a terrific working relationship with them, not just in this, but in previous ones. I got to think that VHB is going to be willing, able and willing to work with the town on that. The other parts, I mean, the The other location that was advantageous had to do with Southborough's history. I mean, we talked about, tying the what is now a historic district on Main Street through through one of my heroes, General Henry Knox, and tying that as a history walk. Now, from a funding level, we ran into problems on that, but the decision we made back in August was to maximize the potential for filling that out in the future. And this is what has been described is consistent with that approach. I think folding in the Nipmuc tribe makes an awful lot of sense because they're also part of Southborough's history in terms of tying together, the area in Main Street, looping up through that area, and then back down on the west side of the old burial ground down to the town green. That was a primary concept and remains a primary concept. So everything that Andrew, Marguerite, that you've said, and Lisa, that you've said is absolutely consistent with what the intended use and function of this space has been from the get-go. And so I can't imagine, since Karen, this was, Karen was a driving force behind this. It's not entirely her baby, but it's a project that's very important to her. I can't imagine she's not going to want to bring as much flexibility as possible to accomplish those initial aims, in addition to what has been described. And quite frankly, Mark, my understanding is that the sidewalks that are going to be put in along Route 85, that the construction folks are ready to go on that. Maybe I'm wrong about that. That was my understanding. So there is work that can be done that can put this in good stead for an ongoing conversation with you folks. The excavation part of it, I suspect that my interpretation of that Mass Historical letter is probably similar to Andrew's, even though he and I haven't talked about it. But VHB is experienced in these sort of areas as well in terms of what steps you need to take and how you need to take them. And if and when you encounter something that is an issue, you stop. And we've understood that from the get-go, that there might be, I don't think, the evidence I've seen, and particularly from the historian you had, the evidence is not terribly compelling that anything is going to have to be stopped there. That's my view. Somebody might disagree with me. But VHB is experienced in this area. And if something as part of the project is comes to the attention, that you don't just charge ahead and go, oh, well, you stop. And that's been the town's plan from the get-go, not to run roughshod over some potentially sensitive areas, but to deal with it the way you deal with it from a construction standpoint. And again, everything I've heard tonight is consistent with that approach. I think the working group continuing to do its work to tweak as best we can and to make as many people happy with still, from my view, is going to be an enormous plus for the town. So anyway, sorry I went on for a little bit, but I haven't talked about this probably since August. So, but that's been my view and my understanding of, quite frankly, everybody's view involved in this project from the get-go.
Great. Thanks, Marty. Chelsea, Andrew, and do you want to jump in before Chelsea?
I'm just going to have some wrap-up comments after you go around.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think if there's, ideas coming out of the working group to tweak things and VHB is on board, I think it's hard for me to visualize exactly what you're talking about without seeing the plans I don't have them right in front of me tonight. But I'd be in favor of, reviewing small tweaks as needed.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. Sam?
Yeah, I, again, first appreciate the hard work that the working group has done. I know it's been a challenge at times, but I think it's important to get a wide range of inputs, which I think has been happening here. So I think that's great. I also like what I'm hearing from Lisa and Marguerite about the use of some of the space up in, I guess it would be the southwest corner of the property. As I recall, the topography there actually is sort of sloped, I think that would be a great place for a little amphitheater kind of slope for story time. I think that, in my view, would be more conducive than the current story time area out on the west side of the library, because that's protected from shade, with shade there and so forth. So I think could be a very nice place for grassy slope for library small group functions. And if anything, I guess I have always felt that we're probably oversupplied with hardscape from the current design. So if there's a stormwater issue, one could probably trade a little hardscape for the grassy slope there, and maybe get some flexibility to do some tweaks on the design that way. And I'd also lobby for, now I'm a fan of VHB. On the other hand, I've seen what a good landscape designer can do versus a more technical engineer on some of these things. So if there was a way to get some ideas from a landscape designer, professional type input, I think that could be an interesting way to think of ways to develop the space that would provide maximum flexibility and utilization. And finally, I guess I would remind the working group that the original charge, I think, is still very important here, that notwithstanding the other issues that have come up appropriately during the discussions, I'm very interested in getting a recommendation from the working group to say, here's what we think this space should look like, and not lose sight of that as part of some of the other conversations. So, and I don't think those are mutually exclusive events. I think that can be done, but I'm very eager to see what thoughts are out there as far as how we use the space. And I think the ideas in terms of, again, of that southwest corner of the space is very interesting, and hopefully that could be developed a little bit as part of a proposal. I'm fine with allowing some extra time. On the other hand, I would hope that we can keep this process moving, and I like Marguerite's idea of getting the road paved and getting the sidewalks in place as we think about other parts of the process. If that can be done efficiently from an engineering and construction standpoint, I would certainly be supportive of that. So again, I appreciate the hard work, but I think it's time to sort of pull it to closure here and get some specific recommendations for the space, as well as any other follow-up projects that need to be pursued. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, so I don't know, you've covered everyone now? All right. Have you okay, you gave your comments at the beginning, but okay. So Marty, I am also and Lisa very excited about the space. I mean, I think that when these meetings get frustrating, I try to focus on one thing which I have been thinking about is how this relates to our discussion about the Tricentennial Committee, right, in 2027. I just would like to see the idea of, when we have the Tricentennial, we have this new space in the center of town by all the town's best historical assets that's really also is a gathering space, but also is educational and educates people about the whole, not just the 300 years of Southborough since 1727, but even before that. So I'm still very excited about that. I think the part that's been frustrating is the concerns about the sensitivity of the land and its proximity to the old burial ground. In some of our discussions, the work here falls like a dichotomy, right? You either go this way or you go one way. And so, Sam, you're talking about ways that things might not be totally mutually exclusive. Just one thing I want to focus in about what's there. So Russell Horn, he used to be on the Southborough Historical Society, lives in Marlborough right now. He is actually quoted in some of the 2005, 2006 Boston Globe articles about this, when the Historical Society got some funding to use ground penetrating radar. They're like metal detectors kind of, and went through the old burial ground and did a map of where there are unmarked burials. They are inside the stone walls. They did identify one place, but it's on the southwest corner, which is the opposite of where there were some burials that were outside of the stone wall, but they were on the other side. They did go around the other walls and they didn't find anything. But one thing which is interesting is one of the members of the working group has been looking at the space, including the dirt, and has found some fragments of like plates that might be from couple hundred years ago that are potentially could be historically significant. And I think that relates to, there was a structure and there's a foundation of a structure on this space that it might have been a school, might have been some type of a home, I think. But that's stuff, whatever, there may be fragments from that prior structure there. And I think what Marguerite is saying, you could have something in the north there that would, if you just set that aside for now. But that's really, from my perspective, what if anything would a dig show? I think it would be more focused on like these fragments of plates and things like that, which have some interest. But and then coming back to what Marguerite, I agree with you. I think that finishing the road and completing that part of it, which I would think would be the most expensive part of this work, getting that kind of shaped will help make things more concrete.
Andrew, do you have the maps that were provided? Vanessa, do you mind, Andrew, putting them up on the screen just so the board has an idea of what you were talking about?
Okay, I've got
Either that or you can forward them, whatever's easier.
One thing I pulled up here is the, let me just make sure I have, because I began with I created a folder on my computer for this, and it's now just grown with so many different documents. But to Chelsea's point, I do have the plans with me. I could show you the plans if you need a refresher on like what we're talking about here. But I can also see if I can, you're talking about the map from Russell Horn?
Yes.
Okay, give me 1 second. I think I can get it.
Okay. I just think it would be, again, interesting for the board.
This is definitely something where you got to look at it to understand it.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I got it. If you want to.
Vanessa, if Andrew could have access.
Yep, I made you a co-host, Andrew. You should see a green button to share your screen at the bottom of Zoom.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me try to adjust this here. Okay. So this is a map of these are the walls of the old burial ground. And if you walk the site, this will make sense here. Like in this area, okay, this is the triangle that we're talking about. And these circles are headstones. And you see, with the ground penetrating radar, they lined up, and this made logical sense that they were all in a line, but they identified a lot of unmarked burials that are within the boundaries of the walls. And then they went looking out here. Were there any unmarked burials outside the walls of the cemetery? And the Fences of Stone book says that these walls were put in 1727, 1728. So you see this, it says burials outside the wall, and it's a shade. They found something here. Okay. This is kind of where like a sidewalk is and Pilgrim Church is here. But I found that significant because it's in a different area than here. Another thing that's significant to me is of this triangle here, remember there's a buffer in the existing plans, like here, where you see this? You see this? Okay, so that covers the length of the stone walls. Well, that's just the property boundary. So the stone walls would be even more here. There's a lot of space here where there's already trees, okay? So there is, within these existing plans, there's already a buffer between the most sensitive area, the old burial ground, and the park layout.
So Andrew, if I can jump in here.
Sure.
If you see the spiral design,
yeah.
If you look at that as a clock face, you have two sets of hardscape sidewalk up above that. And I'm questioning whether all that hardscape needs to be there. And I think that's something we should, yep. I think that's something we should talk about whether we could bring the grass down further to protect it. I would so appreciate some more time to consult with more people and hopefully get some native peoples involved in this to see. I mean, they may not care or they may want to really be part of it. I don't know. But I think that once the road is in, the pressure is off us to do the right thing by St. Mark's because they're probably waiting so that they can build their parking lot. I would say we can't tell what's archaeologically sensitive, but we could certainly have some more time to figure out where we think it is. And apparently ground penetrating radar is impossible to do, I was told. At this point on this, it would have to be a dig on the part that's been disturbed.
Okay. All right, Andrew. So I think you can stop sharing. Thank you. I think, Andrew, that you and Marguerite have gotten a little bit of extra time that you were looking for. I think the board's open to that. You know, and again, I'll follow up with Karen and Marguerite. I would be happy to work with you as well to reach out to the Nipmunks and, you know, try to start a conversation.
Thank you.
So that has happened to some extent so far, but there's been no response.
Okay, well, we'll continue that effort, Andrew. Absolutely.
So I guess the takeaway is okay with some tweaks to the plans that would address library's concerns in a way that satisfies more interested parties in coordination with Karen. What's feasible? Yep. Okay. And then you're still looking for a recommendation about what goes where and historical markers, gathering space.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. Marguerite, thank you. Thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming and participating as
Thanks,
always.
Andrew.
And Andrew, thank you for, you know, coordinating this and working on this on behalf of the board.
Thanks also to Marguerite, who I think has done a great job.
Very kind.
As I said, it's kind of a fun project. Sometimes it feels a little bit difficult. Yeah, Sam's laughing. It's fun, but
It always looked like fun.
no, a lot of times they're really, because these meetings have been kind of tense. They sometimes feel kind of tense.
It's more fun when you don't watch it in real time and when you can skip ahead of the discussion. I find it more fun when you can do that.
To just observe.
I agree, Marty.
I still think in the long run, it's something that is very, very interesting and has a lot of great potential. Really, you know, for all the reasons you were talking about, Marty.
Yeah, I think there's great opportunity here, Andrew. I really do, for a lot of different reasons.
The committee
Right, good stuff. Thanks, Marguerite.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
So
Marguerite.
Sam was saying something, and then we didn't get to
I think
finish.
it's great that the committee members actually care a lot about this and they're very passionately interested in it.
No, you have people that care a lot, and that's good.
That's important, and that was a goal for the committee, and I think we've succeeded in that. So that's good news, I think.
All right. All right, Marguerite, now we'll cut you loose.
Okay,
We're all done.
thanks, everybody. Bye.
All right, thank you. Next up is our final public comment. If anyone would like to speak, please just raise your hand. You're certainly always welcome to. And can we bring over Ms. Burns Fiore, please? Good evening, welcome. You are muted, now you're unmuted.
Thank you. I am not against open public space in downtown Southborough, and I essentially agree with the idea that some kind of park is a good idea. But I think you're not addressing the elephant in the room, which is that this project is being built with taxpayer money on private property with no intention for a land swap. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that my money should be spent there. The road that this is creating has, according to town council, is going to be a private way. It's not going to be a public road, but the town of Southborough is going to pay to maintain it and upgrade it. in perpetuity. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that my taxpayer money should be spent in support of a private school, especially in this town where private schools do not fairly contribute to the cost of the public services that they use.
All right, thank you. Thank you for sticking around and sharing your viewpoint with us. Much appreciated.
I'm disappointed that the select board does not consider this a real issue to be considered and solved. I'm very, very disappointed in that. This is a major problem, and I don't think it's just for me. We are spending taxpayer money on private property. If you had done this the correct way and asked in advance for approval at town meeting with a plan or a proposal, if you had created a swap of land with St. Mark's so that there was ownership of the property, I don't know that I would have the same feelings. I don't think I would have the same feelings. I don't agree that public taxpayer money should be spent on this in any shape or any form, and I don't agree that this project should be continued.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other public comment? Please raise your hand. Ms. Fiore, you were just in here. I'm assuming that's okay. Let's bring her back over for one more. Oh, okay. Your hand is down. Thank you. Again, everyone, thank you for your comments. All right. At this time, do I have a motion to enter into executive session for MGL Chapter 38, Section 21, not returning to open session for the following: an update of contract negotiations for the DPW Superintendent Exemption 2.
So moved.
With intent to return or not?
No,
No, without intent to return. Second.
thank you. Roll call. Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
I,
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio. Aye. I would ask any attendees to please log out at this time so we can enter into executive session.
Can we take 2 minutes